Hey guys, welcome to the Simpademic. Happy Sunday afternoon, evening, wherever you are. And I wanted to talk today about the victim mentality and where the manosphere fits into this particular societal plague, is the best way to put it. I think most of you know what the victim mentality is, and that's when people believe that everything that's happened in their life comes from them being a victim of something. And my church small group is actually doing a study on this subject right now, as far as victim mentality is concerned, and about why people take the victim mentality and even the false benefits of the victim mentality. And what the false benefits, of course, are that you have an excuse or an explanation for why things are not going your way. Now, where's the victim mentality most prevalent, as far as I can see? And it's in social media, and it's in a group of channels called the Manosphere, which are supposedly pro-men type of channels. These are the channels that feed movements like MGTOW, men going their own way. And it's always about how terrible modern women are. And it's always about how women have caused how feminism and women have caused the decline of Western civilization. Now, let's be perfectly clear here. We have a lot of, terrible women out there. And again, I have been falsely accused of harassment for merely approaching one. In a church, no less. And so we have a lot of, there are a lot of terrible women out there who do things to make men look bad, and who do things that will make them look superior versus men. I get it. Again, I've been on the receiving end. That said, I refuse to allow that particular situation to make me not believe that someday there's going to be somebody out there for me. Am I going to openly chase? No. Am I going to openly necessarily approach? No. Because I have a very specific idea, again, as I've mentioned in yesterday's episode, of exactly what I am seeking for. And I'm also at peace with if she never shows up. I'm perfectly content with living the rest of my life this way. That's not a victim mentality. That is a Philippians 4:4, being at peace with yourself, whatever your circumstances are, mentality. This is a biblical concept for those of you that are of the Christian faith. To be content with your circumstances as they were. We have, characters in the Bible, men who have endured horrible, horrible circumstances. And while we don't have any, there's nothing in the Bible referring to what their inner monologue might have been in their head during those times. That said, I'm thinking of the Apostle Paul. I'm thinking of Jacob's son Joseph, who was sold off into slavery by his brothers, who envied him for being the most loved. And I'm thinking, of course, of Job, he of the book Job, who God allowed to be plagued by Satan for the sake of getting him to waver in his allegiance to God. And this is why I love a lot of men in the Bible as much as I do, is because they don't have a victim mentality. And they refuse to blame others or situations for their particular state of being. And the Manosphere, unfortunately, channels like Cosmic Verse, channels like Men Only, channels like Alpha Central, channels like the list goes on and on and on. These are channels that blame women for everything. I can blame women for a lot, again, having personally experienced a lot of these things. That's why a lot of these channels initially appealed to me but they no longer do because I simply refuse to be a victim. It's just no way to put it. And given the things that I've overcome in my particular life, I probably have every right to have a victim mentality, but I simply refuse to, because that's not going to get me where I want to get to in my life. It's not going to get me to where I want to professionally, as tempting as it has been in my particular instance. It's not going to get me to where I want to physically, blaming, limitations from a TBI, for example, for not, eating better or working out. That's not going to get me to where I want to be there either. So I joined a HIIT gym again and just started there about a couple weeks ago. HIIT, for those of you that are unfamiliar, stands for high intensity interval training, which means exercises are done at as much intensity as you can possibly handle for short bursts or short intervals. So they're talking about 30-second series, 45-second series, and things like that. So that's what I do now. And through my TBI, my weight is down to about 210, and I'm about 5'11". So if you figure that out, I'm definitely on the overweight side, but I'm not exactly what would be called morbidly obese. But I want to shape myself to look a little bit better. I do carry a little bit of a tie around the waist. So I'm going to put in the work and get there on that front. I'm being a little bit more mindful. I do pick up my meals a lot because my schedule is very full. Very busy for a guy who lives by himself. But I'm mindful of what I pick and choose when I'm out and about or picking up something. And I'm trying to make as much stuff at home as my time and schedule allows. So I pick salad ingredients at the grocery store, for example. I will shop at the start of the week, like tonight, for example, and will pick things that I can assemble here. I'm working from home this week. We're on a hybrid schedule, by the way, so I get to work from home on one week, and then the next week we're all in the office. So that is what I do. I pick up things like salad ingredients that can be assembled relatively quickly, and then I can take my lunch hour at home here and maybe even catch a little bit of a cat nap because my job is mentally demanding. So, but I refuse to be a victim in any part of life. And all of these channels, they're faceless channels, by the way. You don't know who's creating them. You can't Google them and find out who creates Cosmic Verse, because I believe that, for starters, given the graphics that they use and given the narration that they use, that a lot of these channels are not only faceless, but they're also the content is also AI generated, which means that no individual is voicing them, no individual is producing them, and a lot of the content comes from that are AI generated. Even if they are narrated by an individual, which I think a couple of them I can tell are narrated by an individual, but for example, the graphics, the content, the video clips that are inside of those are all AI harvested. And they'll go into like ChatGPT, for example, and search for women behaving badly or women's dating standards or things like that, and they'll get a whole bunch of video clips that they can assemble and piece together, do a little bit of a voiceover, and boom, they have their videos. And nobody knows who they are except for YouTube itself, because they get sent the checks. So they cash the checks, but nobody knows who they are. And the reason why this is bad is because nobody can hold them accountable. And I think it's shameful that that's allowed. I think there are legitimate reasons for having a faceless channel, but that's not one of them. So for example, if you're covering things like the geopolitical scene, or like international conflicts or wars or things like that, and you may have information that is classified or at least semi-classified in discussing this, that's actually a very good reason to have a faceless channel, is because you can't be necessarily found out about as a source, because it could result in the loss of your freedom. And But a lot of these channels, and I will even add a lot of content creators these days that play to that audience, are female themselves. People like Sarah Eaton, the Lady J, and even to a fair extent Emily King, are people who are women whose target audience is disaffected men. And it affirms they will go out there and affirm men's negative views of women in order to build a following and obviously earn money themselves. One female channel creator who I will always hold the highest respect for, even if she can be a bit abrasive at times and maybe says some things I disagree with, but is definitely very honest about this, and I have joined her in condemning these types of content creators. And of course, that's Billy Ray Brandt. And her following, of course, has gone down because she has chosen to die on this hill. And my following, of course, hasn't taken off because I've also chosen to die on this hill. That we're not going to feed into the victim mentality. And in my case, it's scriptural and personal. But I am not going to feed into this, victim mentality. I think men have a lot of work to do as far as being able to up their game. And I've had episodes about this before. You can up your game to your life game. Again, I'm working out nowadays. I've re-picked up a hobby that I was left behind. Again, I can blame the International Churches of Christ for the loss of my junior bowling career. But I have opted, instead of holding on to that blame, just picking up the sport again right where I left off and trying to see where it carries me. I enjoy bowling. I've always loved it, and it's one of the few things that I've ever gotten more out from back than I've put in. And so, therefore, I am all the more happy to just assume this, pick up the sport again. These are things that, you can improve your life game. And even if you're not doing it with the idea of finding a woman or dating somebody, these are things that are going to help you in the long run. Because, first of all, if you improve yourself and you're doing it for yourself, then you're doing it for the right reasons. Second of all, if you should be fortunate enough to land a relationship, this is going to allow you to have a life outside of that relationship, which is very, very key and very critical. Particularly as a man, to have a life outside of that relationship. And if you have a life outside of any woman or relationship, you're going to resist the urge to simp, because no woman is going to you're not going to feel that any woman is all that necessary to you, to where you have to feel like you have to beg and plead and give unwarranted attention and slide into their DMs constantly or constantly harass them via text. You're not going to feel the need to do this because your life is already complete on its own, because you have all these things that you're building and you're working on. And I'm very proud to actively be working on all these things. I'm working on my faith. I'm working on, my small group of men where we're picking up the study about the victim mentality as a mind trap, by the way. And so, men, you have a little bit of work that you can do too. This is not all on women. Again, a lot of women are terrible, and as I've mentioned before, I've had a couple of these. I briefly dated somebody who didn't reciprocate, and I decided, you know what? I'm going to step away from you, because you're just not returning the favors. Everything was on me, it seemed. And it only lasted about 4 weeks, but I was not in a position where I felt like I had to have this lady. So I just, calmly walk away. Because if you're being honest to yourself about as a man, most men don't go where they're not wanted. We really don't. And the only people who try to go where they're not, the only men who try to go where they're not wanted are simps. But the women love the attention, the unwarranted attention, unearned attention. That woman's going to have to earn my attention because of all the things I just mentioned. But men, we have a lot of work to do. And, I mentioned some options out there. So let's pick it up and start working on some things. Even if you don't wind up dating, you will still win because we benefit from these things. We benefit from eating better. We benefit from going to the gym and working out. We benefit from all these things because we're putting in effort. And even if it's with the mindset of elevating our own market value as far as attraction in women is concerned, it still benefits us personally. So put in the work. Guys, this is my call and challenge to you. Put in the work in your life game. And watch things improve. As your life improves and as your emotional craving for a woman, the desperation will go down. Because your life doesn't have to have a woman to be complete. And if you're a woman, it doesn't have to have a man to be complete. So let's do some work here. Let's all get better. Obviously, if you have any reactions to this, I definitely would appreciate a comment. Don't forget to like and even share this video. I appreciate the few of you that are out there. Again, I'm not taking a very popular tack. I'm not going to go viral with any of this. I'm not going to be extremely monetized from any of this because I take a tack like Billy Ray that's not all that popular. So men, some of this is on us. Take some time for everybody to get better here. And of course, if you see any of these women posting these contents of them behaving badly or setting unrealistic expectations, don't be afraid to call that out either. But on the same token, there's plenty of blame to go around. There really is. So let's just pledge to make ourselves better. Pledge to make the whole situation better. And I will leave it at that. So enjoy your rest of your Sunday. Hopefully you all have a good week. And peace out, homies.